Okay, finally got this thing recording. Um, Hello, this is Awesome Lawson coming to you live on tape from Richlands, Maple Hill, whatever, North Carolina. I thought I would do a video on the flight sim thing. I have a bit of a cold, so I'm a little, stopped up. But I thought I would go into, okay, Lawson, he's doing his flight sim thing. He's out there playing his game and blah, 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 blah. But it's a little bit more than that. And I thought I would share, some of the intricacies of it with you, starting with planning a flight. So what we're looking at here is a map of the United States. And this is a website called SkyVector.com. And it is used, well, for flight planning purposes. And it's not only used in the flight simming, but it's used for real world, flight planning. And so it's the reality of all these things that come together that make the flight sim interesting. Aside from SkyVector here, which is we're going to spend most of our time on, the flight sim that I have, I connect to another site called Pilot Edge, and they provide professional air traffic control services for these flights that are doing the flight sim. And not only that, but they also have a program where you start off step 1, step 2, step 3, and so on for VFR, visual flight rules flights. And they also have the same itinerary for instrument flight rules, or IFR. I like to brag that I did earn my instrument rating, but I haven't flown for over 20 years, and what it takes to pass an IFR check ride back then versus what it is now is two different things. So I'm going to have to do that over. But anyway, to the flight planning. And we're looking at, like I said, a map of the United States. And so the Pilot Edge criteria has mostly the Western United States. And but I just wanted to show you this thing here a little bit. You can select layers here, and you can get things like, okay, where are there any temporary flight restrictions? Check that box. And immediately you see some things pop up here. There's a red dot here. Any of these red and orange. There's a big one down here in Florida. I wouldn't be surprised if that was President Trump, going down to, Florida for the weekend. You have a permanent permanent temporary flight restriction in the Washington, D.C. area for obvious reasons. And so you can see things like that with the layers. So if you're planning a flight and there's a temporary flight restriction in the path of your flight, you would certainly want to know that. You have pilot reports. And so these pop up, and these are pilots who were in flight reporting weather conditions to whoever they're talking to. An example in this area here, I'm not going to zoom in on it, but they're saying it's overcast from 1,300 feet, and that was reported 34 minutes ago. And so that really helps air traffic controllers, stay on top of the weather game, flight conditions in a particular area. Over here is one is light to mixed icing from 12,000 to 14,000 feet. That was reported 51 minutes ago. So anyway, you get the idea. Pilot reports. What else do you have? Icing. Are there any icing conditions? Check that box. And there are these shaded areas. There are icing conditions, whatever the altitudes are. This is moderate ice, moderate ice, moderate ice. Doesn't really give much more information than that. Which areas of the United States are currently, you could not fly visual flight rules because it's under instrument conditions, or IMC, instrument meteorological conditions. Check that box, and the areas that pop up, you're not going to fly VFR in these areas right now. And so this is really, good, information. But given that it is I'm going to use it for planning a flight on the flight simulator, and I'm going to set the weather to custom. In other words, perfect conditions. I won't have to worry about these real conditions right now, but when I get back into flying, you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to consult this when I go to plan an actual flight. Another thing you can click on here, it says text weather, VTARs and TAFs. When you click on that, these are all of the, well, from this distance, the weather reporting places, which is typically an airport. And if it's green, it's VFR conditions. This blue one here, which happens to be San Francisco. It's overcast at 3,400 feet, so it's marginal, I guess you would say, VFR. The pink ones probably are straight up, or IFR. It's probably straight up IFR. It's looking like visibility is a quarter statute mile, freezing and fog, and so not good conditions there. But anyway, so back to the flight sim thing and using this for flight planning for the flight simulator. Typically, I'm flying out here on the West Coast, going to zoom in on this. And so the flight sim had me starting at some little dinky airport, and I'm going to try to get in that neighborhood here. I think this is it right here. Try to zoom in on this. Actually, it was this one right down here, Oceano, and it's a little non-towered airport, and had to go out there and do a couple of basic things, which I've done. And as you complete each of these tasks, then you can move on to the next one. So the next flight, the second one, was flying from Oceano here up to San Luis County Regional, which is a towered airport as depicted by the blue. And you can see the layout of the runways, and which is helpful, based on your orientation. If I was coming in from this direction, I would be looking, for a particular orientation as compared to, coming in from the south, right? It's going to look different as you look out the front window of the airplane. So anyway, had to do a flight from Oceano to the towered airport at San Luis Obispo, and to start getting the pilot used to communicating with the tower, right? Then on the third or fourth one, we went from San Luis Obispo up here down to Santa Maria, which is also a towered airport. And so now you're flying from a towered airport to a towered airport and talking to air traffic control, following the instructions, but using all the proper procedures from the time you're going to taxi, to taking off, to departing, to arriving at the next airport, contacting the tower, or getting the weather, contacting the tower, and following their instructions for landing. Oops, sorry. And so I've done that one. So now the task is going to be flying from, and each time you finish and you end up at a particular airport, you start from there for your next task. And I'm going to zoom out here just a little bit, because the next task is to go from down here at Santa Maria. And I'm going to see if I can, I want to do something here. Hang on just a second. Okay, I won't burn up time doing that. So then the next task is to fly from Santa Maria, which is a towered airport, way over here to Bakersfield, which is a towered airport. But en route, the thing that's going to change on this one is to get flight services or flight following from point A to point B. Not a huge deal. You know, you're talking to ground to taxi out. You're talking to the tower to leave. And once you're outside of their, you know, their airspace, then you would call up an approach controller or a center controller, and you know, make, you know, communications with them and tell them you want flight following to, in this case, Bakersfield. And they'll assign you an altitude and a squawk code to dial in on your transponder so they can see you on the screen and make you different than anybody else that's out there. And you know, once you get up here towards, in this case, once you get up here towards Bakersfield, they'll tell you radar service is terminated, contact the tower, blah, blah, blah. Contact the tower, you know, get your landing instructions. You have already checked the weather, and follow the instructions for landing. So that's the task that I'm going to do now. So as far as some of the flight planning, and again, on this SkyVector site, we know we're going to go from Santa Maria, and I'm just going to zoom in here in Santa Maria for a second, and we can see, there we go, Santa Maria, that the airport identifier is SMX. When we look at Bakersfield, it's BFL, okay? And so you can click the flight plan option here. We don't need to enter in an aircraft tail number. We can put in our airspeed, which is going to be 130 knots en route. We're going to fly an altitude of 5,500 feet. So this will be 550. That says 6. How about 055? How about 055? There we go. And this airplane burns 10 gallons of fuel per hour. We're going to depart from SMX, and when you do this, you preface it with a K, so KSMX. And so, and the destination airport is KBFL, which is Meadowsfield, Bakersfield. And so this is now drawn a line from direct from Santa Maria to Bakersfield, all right? And you know, straight line being the shortest distance, right? So it's telling me now that the distance is 76 nautical miles, and the estimated time en route is 34 minutes, all right? And so down here, departing Santa Maria, it tells you the same thing. This is a 051 degree heading. It's 76 nautical miles. And I do know that based on this direction of travel that I want to be at odd thousands plus 500. So I chose 5,000, which is odd number 5,500. So why would I choose that altitude as far as flight planning? Well, as you look at each, as you look at this, it's a VFR sectional. As you look at each of these squares, which is your latitude and longitude lines, and they make a square within, or okay, we're going to call it a square. Within each of those areas, you'll see a blue number. It's a large 5 in this case and a small 5, which is your minimum safe altitude in that area, so you don't bump into anything, is 5,500 feet. Anywhere in this area, if you're at 5,500 feet, you're not going to run into anything. Good to know. Down in this area where we're departing is 5,200 feet. And once we get over here towards Bakersfield and this area, it's 3,700 feet. And you can also see that the color changes from the green, which is a lower elevation, over here to brownish. You've got higher elevations, right? But the thing of it is, and over here it starts off kind of not so mountainous either. So you know you're kind of starting off in a lower elevation. You're going to cross over some mountains, the brown area, and then it's going to swoop back down into a low elevation area again, sea level, based on sea level, right? And so how do they come up with the number? Well, somewhere in this square, for example, is something that is just under 5,500 feet above sea level. And that whatever that one little thing is what causes this number to occupy the whole space. And you're like, well, is that thing in my route of flight? Whatever it may be, right? And I'll make it easy. Right here where my mouse is, it says Fellows, Rancho Murrieta. Right below that, you see that black dot. And underneath that is a number is 5106. That is 5,106 feet above sea level. That's why this number here is 5,500, because of that one little point right there. So, you know, it could be a weather balloon, you know. You could be out in the desert and it's like, you know, 500 feet, you know, and then you got one that's like 10,000 feet. Well, there's might be a weather balloon, a tethered weather balloon in that area. And you're like, gee, it's a low elevation. It's green. Why is it 10,000, you know, whatever. And, you know, it can be a man-made or a natural object. So in this case, there's this little spot down here. It's not in our path of flight. I don't have to worry about the mountain heights here. I know I can fly safely through here at 5,500 feet. So then once we get over towards Bakersfield, well, we're going to have to descend to land, right? And so as we look at Bakersfield, and we can zoom in on that, and we have the, looking for it. Right here's Meadowsfield BFL. It is 510 feet above sea level, excuse me, above sea level. So that is just kind of correlating that with this 3,700, you know, that, you know, when you get close to the airport, you need to be getting down to, you know, this general altitude. Speaking of that, traffic pattern altitude on a visual flight, you're going to get in the traffic pattern and, you know, fly your approach. Traffic pattern you might remember from the movie Top Gun, when he requested a flyby and he said, "Negative, Ghost Rider, the pattern is full." Well, this is the pattern, right? The traffic pattern. Typically 900 feet above field elevation. And so with the field elevation at Bakersfield being 510 feet, add 900 feet to that, 9 and 5 is 14. So you're technically 1,410 indicated on the altimeter to be in the, you know, traffic pattern when you get in here. Okay, so we're planned for that, right? We know what our you know, traffic pattern altitude is going to be when we get in there. We know what direction we're coming in from. We know that as we look out the window, the front windshield of the airplane, well, what the orientation is of the runways. So it kind of gives us, you know, something to look for. But they might say, for example, land coming in from this direction. I wish there was an annotation thing I could do to make the mouse stand out a little more. But anyway, they might say, come in from this direction and land. They might say, come in from this direction and land. They might say, land on the left, land on the right, da-da-da, okay? And so, you know, you're not necessarily going to fly straight to this point when you contact the tower out here, since it's controlled airspace, you know, when to call them up at least 10 miles out and tell them who you are, what you're doing, what you want to do. And they'll say, okay, you know, you're going to be landing, runway, whatever. And so then you can start getting that in your mind and then start maneuvering, you know, for the position to get to the runway that you need. And so that's kind of it right now for the planning phase. I know what my en route altitude is going to be. I know that I'm going to be at about 1,400 feet, you know, within a couple miles of arriving there. So I'm at the proper traffic pattern altitude. I can, now that I'm zoomed in here a little closer, I can, you know, use these layers maybe a little bit more meaningful, are there any temporary flight restrictions in my path of my flight? No, there isn't. There's no red circles. Okay, that's good. Is there any icing? Well, there is, north of me, but probably some really high altitudes. Is there any turbulence? Oh, yeah. Apparently there's some turbulence, moderate turbulence. Is any of the area under instrument flight rules? Yes, it is. And that's why I'm going to use custom weather just to keep things perfect weather, daytime, and, like I say, work it in my favor. I just want to pass this thing and move on to the next one, right? I don't want to need to have to fight the airplane the whole time. But again, in real world planning, you could, you can't use custom weather in the real world, so you really need to take these things into consideration. And SkyVector, makes that happen for you. And so really cool. All right, so that's it for this video here. We'll be, I'll be, when you say we, when you're like talking on the radio, yeah, we'll be there in about 15 minutes. So I'm going to take this information here. Oh, another thing that's kind of cool. I got to show you this on the flight plan. Okay, so we're coming into Bakersfield. BFL always makes me think of Bluefield, West Virginia, so I'm trying not to say that. Meadows Field. When I hover my mouse pointer over that, here's the airport diagram that I can click on, and it's going to open up. And this is legit. This is real world stuff. Airport diagram for what's the name of it? Bakersfield. And I can start looking at things like, okay, well, when I get there, I can't just sit on the runway. What am I going to do when I get there? Right? You got to get off the runway. And there should be, here's an option to zoom in. Let me zoom in here real good. Here's some more information to get the weather as you're inbound, 118.6. We'll get more into that. The tower, 118.1. You'll need to know that to call them up. Ground control, 121.7. And so, here's not only the runways, but here's where the tower is, right? Here is transient parking, okay? Transient general aviation parking in this whole area right here. So this would be a good place to shoot for once I land, right? And so are they going to have me come in on runway 30? Or are they going to have me come in on runway 12? I don't know. But what you do need to know is that once you do land, you're going to be going over towards the tower side of the airport. This little gray area is the D, the E, the F. Those are taxiways. You have this long one here with the A on it. That's taxiway alpha. They use phonetics. And so whenever I land, I might be like, okay, I think, okay, if I come in on runway 12, I'm probably not going to make the first turn off. So I can pretty much expect the second turn off, which will be echo. Or I might just ease on down and, turn on delta. And then I would stop and contact ground and blah, blah, blah. So, all this stuff. If I'm coming in from on runway 30, okay, coming in, I'm going to turn to the right. This is a really long runway. There's a good chance I'm going to make delta, once I land and do my rollout. Worst case, come out on echo, I'm going to turn right if I were coming in on runway 30. And just so that when you get there and you turn off, you kind of have an idea where you are, because oftentimes you're coming into an airport you haven't been to before. So it's good to orient yourself, prior to, getting there. So I'll print this out and I'll make notes on it inbound, en route. When I get the weather, I'll write down what's the weather and stuff like that and things and make notes. So, like I say, pretty real world stuff. Notice here that this says on the right hand side over here, 05 December 2019, which is today's the 7th, until 02 January 2020. So this is actual real deal. It works. Airport diagram. No BS. Okay, I think I've beat that to death. I'm going to stop the video here, and we'll see you in the airplane.